Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So guys, I'm getting started a little early today. I'm still going to do the show at 5 o'clock, but I have a few items that I want to do, and so I'm going to start a little bit early. Not to mention, we want to go see Black Panther. We want to go see Black Panther. And we think tickets will be available today. Let me make sure my sound and everything else is intact. Yes. Still haven't figured out what's going on with my mic. At least my other mic. So, still have Old Faithful. First, guys, I want to thank all my patrons, everyone who subscribes, everyone who watches and likes my vids. Like I said before, even if you dislike the video, if you sit there and watched it, thank you very much. I also want to thank the people who donate Super Cash. You guys are also appreciated. All of you are absolutely appreciated. You guys make the channel what it is. You really do. Second point, Elizabeth Voss is going to be here tomorrow at 5 p.m. So that should be a damn interesting conversation. I've also spoken to Steve Bassett. Steve Bassett is the only lobbyist for UFOs. Seriously, he's the only single lobbyist for UFOs. So he's going to be on the show either at the beginning of March or at the end of February. We haven't nailed that down yet. And I have another gentleman, Joseph Burks, I'm sorry. Now, I like Joseph Burks. I saw his lectures, and him and I started this back and forth on Facebook. So I've invited him onto the show. He's also a UFO investigator going back for God knows how long, with these amazing stories to tell about his work in that particular field, including a few books that he was privy to write on the subject. So that should be damn interesting. Him and I are nailing down when he's going to be on the show, but it may be next week. It may even be the end of this week. So now that the announcements are out the way, I did a video yesterday showing one independent senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, showing his balls in a jar. His name was on the jar, and they were under a sign of the Democratic National Committee. I did that, and yes, not necessarily the most polite thing in the world to do, but I did that in response to a video that Sanders put out that was just shameless, shaming himself profoundly in the aims of assuaging, I guess you could say, a democratic population, but also doing an interview that was really gross, like full well feeding into the Russia hysteria nonsense. And I know that Bernie Sanders knows better, and yet Bernie Sanders toes this line. He toes the line, talking to the most oblivious man on the planet, Chuck Todd. Now, a few people did not like my perspective in this video. And mind you, it's not that I enjoyed making the video. It's not that I enjoy making this particular video. I'm a Sanders supporter. So it's not the easiest thing in the world to be like, whoa, what the hell is that? If we're one of these people who are in your camp who are saying, yes, we want you to go forward, we think you're doing good works, and then you do some shit like this, well, you can understand that it gives pause. And there's no way you can support each and everything that a person does, particularly when the person is doing it in the service of something that A, hurts you, B, hurts him, and C, creates somewhat of a political thicket. Just as a whole, just by itself. Meaning, this fomenting over Russia is nonsense. It's utter nonsense. And these people are acting like this stuff is Pearl Harbor. It's fucking amazing. The Bernie Sanders, who was chained to the black woman so many years ago. The Bernie Sanders, who railed at Hillary Clinton for her behavior of toppling governments. That guy, the guy who did the campaign speeches where he had 20,000 people coming to see him, and he's bashing Democrats, bashing Republicans, bashing the billionaires. I want that guy back. I want that guy back. I don't want the guy who sits on there schmoozing it up with Chuck Todd, talking about how the Russians, social media, I mean Twitter and Facebook, toppled a political campaign. It was toppling democracy in the United States, while he himself was being cheated in that same by the same party that he's out here shilling for. I understand that some people didn't necessarily like it. And look, at the end of this video, if you want to call in, if you're a patron, and the one person who one of the people who sent me a message on Twitter, Terry, if you're around, feel free to call in. Feel free to call in. You can air your grievances. Yeah, you can air your grievances. But I'm going to get my spill. My point in this is why this matters. Why this matters. This is not innocuous. This is not one of those things of... The reason why I flagged this is because I think this is somewhat of a big deal. I wouldn't bring it up if I didn't think it was a big deal. So this video is going to be more so on why this matters. Why I think this is somewhat of a big deal. And why this is something that Sanders shouldn't necessarily just get a pass on and walk by on. That should be flagged that this behavior is problematic. Me liking Sanders doesn't necessarily undermine the fact that the behavior is problematic. So let me show the video first that sparked all of this. One of my subscribers, Joan Levino, sent me a video of Sanders. And she was watching it on Meet the Press. I think it was Sunday morning. I think she was depressed by that particular video. Let me show the video, and then I'm going to talk about it afterwards. I'm going to play the video in its entirety. I'm not going to interrupt it. And I'm going to give an explanation of why I think this matters and why I think this is somewhat of a big deal. So let's take a look. And by big deal, let me put it in context. If Sanders runs, Sanders gets my vote. But it doesn't necessarily mean I like everything that Sanders does. This is one of those things that I greatly dislike, and I'm going to explain why people on the left dislike this, because some people may not necessarily understand on what's the thing that bugs people like me when they see Sanders shilling for the Democratic Party in this way. So let's see this and this.
What most Americans know is that at the end of my campaign, when it appeared that Clinton was going to win, and certainly after she won the nomination, what the Russians were doing is flocking to Bernie Sanders' Facebook sites, and they were saying to Bernie Sanders supporters, as they were, by the way, to Black Lives Matter supporters, people who are fighting for social justice, as they were saying to the Muslim community, if you voted for Sanders, you have to understand Hillary Clinton is crazy, she's a murderer, she is terrible, all kinds of horrible, horrible things about Hillary Clinton. And it turns out that one of our social media guys in San Diego actually went to the Clinton campaign in September and said something weird is going on. Bernie's not in the campaign. Hundreds of these people are now coming onto his Facebook site. So I think we already knew that. It was an effort to undermine American democracy and to really say horrible things about Secretary Clinton.
Do you have an idea of how to prevent this going forward? I mean, this was a sophisticated, so they basically used the divide of the Democratic Party between you and Secretary Clinton at the time to polarize things even more.
Right. Look, first of all, the main point to be understood is that what everybody understands except Donald Trump is that this was not just the 2016 campaign. They intend to do this in 2018. And I think one of the weirdest things in modern American history is you have every intelligence agency, you have the Mueller report, you have Trump's own administration saying the Republicans want to sabotage the 2018 campaign. Everybody knows this except the President of the United States. Yeah. And I think people are asking, what is going on with this president? What we have got to do, and I think Senator Langford touched on some of the issues, front end, what we have got to say to the Russians, you are doing something to undermine American democracy. You are not going to get away with it. This is a major assault. If you do that, there will be severe, severe consequences. Right. We've got to protect states and communities to make sure that their voting is not compromised.
Just so we're blisteringly clear about this. Now, I'm going to have to switch my network because I think I have a faster network. So if I blink out for a second, don't freak out. Don't panic. Up. All right, we should be back up. What he's talking about is Facebook and Twitter ads. That's what he's talking about. Bernie Sanders and Chuck Todd is having this conversation about severe consequences and all this other stuff. And he's talking about Facebook ads, Twitter ads, YouTube videos. and throwing Black Lives Matter, Muslims, and his own supporters under the bus to do it. Meaning these people weren't doing things because they had thoughts in their heads. Black Lives Matter wasn't involved in it because black men or African Americans would get shot in the face and then the cops were walking. That's not why they were upset. His supporters weren't upset because they were cheating Bernie Sanders. His supporters was upset because they were being manipulated by Russia. Same thing with Muslims. Muslims weren't upset with this idea of Hillary Clinton being a warmonger and toppling democracies and whatnot. Nope, it's not that. It was Putin. It was Vladimir Putin. All of this is used as an attack piece on Donald Trump. I'm not necessarily mad if you go after Donald Trump. I don't necessarily like you go in a sleazy way. We are literally talking about social media. That hyperbole, him freaking out, the hysteria, the severe consequences. Social media. He's talking about social media. That's amazing. So there's a few points here. The first main point is, one, your base doesn't buy it. Your base does not buy this. Now, your base may buy that Russia had social media accounts going after one particular person or another person. Fair enough. Your base may buy that. But they don't buy the ends, meaning they know that this is being used to obfuscate from actual issues. They understand that. And your base is somewhat cynical, meaning it is weird for your base to see you sit here talk about Russia cheating American democracy through social media accounts, when the actual thing that was a subversion to American democracy, or subversion to representative government, was them cheating you. Them cheating you, Bernie Sanders. Do you understand how weird it is? You are out here talking about Russia cheating, and we're talking about social media accounts. When they cheated you at one turn after the next, the entire apparatus of the DNC was essentially used against you, even though it was supposed to be impartial. They were shutting down polling locations, knowing full well that any cases where you did well, they would outperform. Meaning it was making it difficult for certain people who are your voters to go out and vote for the candidate they wanted. The cheating that took place in Vegas and Nevada, the cheating that took place in Arizona, the cheating that took place in New York, throwing all those people off the voting rolls. They were cheating you. They were cheating you. And the guy who they were cheated is out here shilling for him to cover for the fact that they were cheating you. And is using this hyperbolic language as if this was some kind of Pearl Harbor, as this was some kind of attack on American democracy. They're talking about social media accounts. They're talking about social media. What are you talking about? You were cheated. I guess this is the point I'm trying to make. Your supporters, people who backed you, understand as they watch this, they end up with this thing of hitting their face on the wall of, wait a minute, they cheated Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is out here talking about social media accounts being a threat to democracy. How brittle is your democracy if social media accounts is the thing that brings it down? Your supporters don't buy it. They don't buy it. They understand that it attacks the left, meaning you're kicking in the knees people who supported you. You're kicking in the knees Black Lives Matter. You're kicking in the knees Muslims. You're essentially saying that these people don't have brain cells in their heads, that the things that motivate them and matter to them were really just Russian stage play, Russian theater. It wasn't this issue at all. These guys didn't really have main issues. It was the Russians. Do you know how weird this is? This goes back to what they did to Martin Luther King, saying that the man was a communist. Not that blacks were unhappy in the society itself because of the way the structure was arranged, but because of the Soviets. And now we're back to Bernie Sanders, the man who was chained to a black woman, smearing Black Lives Matter, using the same argument that they did, that the neocons did back during those days, back during the 50s and 40s and the 60s. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And by the way, your base also knows a few things that the other people don't necessarily pay attention to. Your base knows that even if they accept what's being said, even if they accept the premise of this, that, okay, they indicted the Russian trolls, people who are on social media. Right off the bat, the fact that you're calling them trolls shows how ridiculous this is. But okay, they're Russian trolls. There were people who were writing bad things about Hillary Clinton. Okay. Your base knows that fake media had little to no impact based on the studies of the last election. Meaning, even if what they're saying is true, There was no impact. Little to no impact. You want another study? How about Stanford? Stanford study examines fake news in the 2016 presidential election. These are at the bottom, but just as a news flash, little to no impact. Little to no impact. What your audience knows is that in order for these guys, these Facebook posts and Twitter posts, and it sounds ridiculous to even say it, but in order for the attack to democracy on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, in order for that to have any weight whatsoever, it would have to override the media apparatus, meaning Politico, Washington Post, New York Times. It has to override all of the newspapers in the local newspaper that has their opinion, all of the celebrities, all of the politicians. It would have to override all of the television shows that is telling you to vote for Hillary Clinton. It has to override all of this, including Hillary Clinton's millions of dollars spent on her own Twitter trolls to go out there and say bad things about Bernie Sanders. She couldn't even get people motivated on their own. She also had Facebook ads. Those Russian ads would have to be the most prolific things. You need to hire these guys, not put these guys in indictments. This is the most magnificent shit you'd ever seen in your life if these guys writing Facebook and Twitter ads can override American democracy. This sounds absurd. That woman had $1 billion running her campaign. She had people lined up in rows supporting her. And they're saying that all these people lined up in rows, all these television shows, all these television appearances, whether you want to talk about Jimmy Campbell, Mary J. Blige singing beside Hillary Clinton, all of this was undermined, the $1 billion apparatus, by social media accounts. That's amazing. So your base knows that. Your base knows that this is patently ridiculous. A, it didn't necessarily have the impact that you guys are making it out to be. B, they know that this is absurd. And going beyond that, going beyond the studies themselves, your base also knows that we do the same thing. The argument that you're having here with Chuck Todd, or the conversation you're having with Chuck Todd, doesn't give context, doesn't give information. The audience leaves that particular conversation thinking to themselves, well, Bernie Sanders says that this is a big fucking deal and that there needs to be severe consequences. That's what Bernie Sanders said. But Bernie Sanders and Mr. Oblivious, Chuck Todd, the most oblivious man on the planet, in no way got across to the audience that the United States does this. We also do this. We meddle in elections. We destroy countries. We go further than meddling in elections. We actually destroy governments. We're in the process illegally of trying to destroy a government now in Syria. We go beyond just dicking around with cyberspace. This is former CIA chief admits to meddling in foreign elections for their own good. Former CIA chief James Woolsey appeared on Fox News to push the narrative of how dastardly them Ruskies, are for meddling with the sacred soul of American democracy. This is Tyler Durbin, Zero Hedge. Woolsey did his patriotic deep state duty and proclaimed the evils of expansionist Russia and dropped facts like Russia has a larger cyber army than its standing army before he moved on to China and its existential threats. But then, beginning at around 4:30, the real debacle of conversation begins as Ingram asks Woolsey, have we ever tried to meddle in other countries' election? Her response, he responds, surprisingly, frankly, oh, probably. But it was for the good of the system. To which Ingram followed up, we don't do that now, though. I mean, we don't mess in other people's elections. Well, only for the good cause, in the interests of democracy. He giggles, and she laughs out loud. Literally, in the video, you can watch the video. I put it in the bottom. She's like, "We don't meddle in democracies. Only for the good of the system." And she's like, "We meddle in other people's democracies. It's so funny. It's so funny. It's so funny. It's hilarious to me that we meddle in other people's democracies, while at the same token have a bunch of running around screaming that this is Pearl Harbor." The cognitive dissonance is amazing. It's Pearl Harbor when they do it, but when we do it, it is fucking hilarious. It's fucking hilarious. Your supporters knows this. They know this. So what are they to do? What are your supporters to do? They see you attacking them, while at the same token shilling for Democrats, meaning they full well understand that Democrats are using this to obfuscate from the real issues that affect them and suck all the air out the room. And They know that even if they accept the premise that what they're talking about is just social media accounts. And what is the context that your supporters are supposed to see this in? The second problem here, and this is kind of the big issue, I think. Your supporters, when they look at you, one of the reasons that they gravitated towards you is the cynical base, the misanthropes, the people who looked at you and said, okay, I'll give it a shot. Bernie Sanders, he's going to be our guy. They started this process off somewhat cynical. And now, knowing that they know all of this stuff that I just kind of mentioned, they see you and they think to themselves, Bernie Sanders knows this. Bernie Sanders is not a fucking idiot. Bernie Sanders understands this. Bernie Sanders understands the context of this stuff. So if Bernie Sanders understands the context of this, if Bernie Sanders knows this, then why is Bernie Sanders saying stuff that he knows is not true? Saying stuff that he knows is not giving the measure and the context that's mattered or needed in the conversation for the conversation to make sense in any real and earnest way? Why is Bernie Sanders talking to the most oblivious man in the world as if he himself, Bernie Sanders, is oblivious? And we're stuck with this thing of he's doing this to shill. That the guy who was considered the honest politician, who was considered to be earnest and above politics himself, has dirtied himself into the politics. You can understand that his supporters looks at this and says, Bernie Sanders knows what Bernie Sanders is doing, and he is still doing this, and he's attacking us. He's attacking us. The last part about this, and I think the biggest, is that the best argument that the left has made, the best argument has been to fail miserably. Of all the problems that are affecting us and addressing this nation, you guys have failed in your pursuits. It is time for the adults in the room to take over. Now, I'm sorry guys, I'm looking at my thing. It's going in and out. I'm having weirdness with my connection. Alright, I'll check it in this video, after this video. I lost my place. Oh yeah, you have a cynical base. So, in having a cynical base that already came to this process somewhat distrusting the process, and they gravitated towards you because they considered you to be earnest and honest and straightforward in the way that you go about your affairs. Now they're seeing you getting into the muck and the mire of the politics itself. You're shilling for Democrats. Where's the independent senator from for Vermont? Because right now this looks like the Democratic senator from Vermont, because you are towing that line. The second part to this is, what happened to health care, to Medicare for all? What happened to it? I haven't heard about it in a long time. What happened to college, meaning public college, university? What happened to the DACA recipients? What happened to them? Do you understand that taking the tack that you've taken with Russia, all of the things that you cared about are now sucked out of the way, meaning those things are not on the agenda in the way that they would have been on the agenda in normal circumstances if you didn't necessarily toe this particular line with Russia? This matters because at the end of the day, all of the issues that Sanders, his strong points, his strengths, are being undermined in the way that he's going about his affairs in this. I understand that they're attacking him on the standpoint of Russia thing. I understand that he felt like he needed to respond and he needed to be strong to kind of put that out there on the Russian thing. But is it possible to have this conversation in a way that doesn't necessarily kick everybody else in the knees, including yourself, when you're trying to rebuff people like Mr. Oblivious Chuck Todd? This matters because it shows weakness. This matters because it attacks the left. This matters because it attacks Sanders. This matters because, I gotta be honest, it completely kicks him in the knees in his strongest point, which was earnestness. It dissolves it. There is no way to look at Sanders, and don't take my word for it, look at it again. It is impossible to look at this video and come away with the conclusion that Sanders is not shilling for somebody, because Sanders understands that what he's saying here is utterly ridiculous, and yet he is saying it nonetheless, and he is being extremely strong in saying ridiculousness. Look at the video again. I ended on this, and understand that what they're talking about is social media accounts. and listen to the hysterics that they're putting and injecting into this conversation over social media accounts, especially when we, the United States, do the same thing and worse. We destroyed Libya. We destroyed Iraq. We tried to destroy Syria. We're there illegally now. We go into one country after the next, bombing those countries. When you get into this idea of Chile, Iran, Congo, I mean, oh God, South America, one country after the next, where we invaded or instigated ourselves into the electoral process. This is ridiculous. That's my point. Bernie Sanders has to know this is ridiculous. And yet, he toes the line for Mr. Oblivious Chuck Todd anyway. You can like Sanders and still dislike what he's doing. And I vastly dislike what he's doing here. And I got to be honest, his strong suit, that earnestness, this kind of Colin Powell quality. This is the Colin Powell quality. They're using him in the same way. They're essentially pulling him like a toothpaste container, like getting, squeeze everything we can out of him before we discard him to the side. So by the time he runs again in 2020, he's just as snarled and essentially ensconced into politics, just like everybody else. Let's take a look at the video one more time. And let's flip back.
What most Americans know is that at the end of my campaign, when it appeared that Clinton was going to win, and certainly after she won the nomination, what the Russians were doing is flocking to Bernie Sanders' Facebook sites, and they were saying to Bernie Sanders supporters, as they were, by the way, to Black Lives Matter supporters, people who are fighting for social justice. Right. As they were saying to the Muslim community, if you voted for Sanders, you have to understand Hillary Clinton is crazy, she's a murderer, she is terrible, all kinds of horrible, horrible things about Hillary Clinton.
Now, right here, what's the reality of this? We're talking about social media posts. We're talking about social. I need to keep injecting that because this is too ridiculous. We're talking about social media. These guys are acting like this country was attacked in some way. We don't have standing to be hysterical about this in the way that they're talking about it. And even if we did have standing, what do you subscribe? Well, what do you prescribe? What do you want to do about it? You're talking about severe consequences over a social media campaign, essentially people buying Facebook ads and Twitter ads. Let's keep going.
And it turns out that one of our social media guys in San Diego actually went to the Clinton campaign in September and said something weird is going on. Bernie's not in the campaign. Hundreds of these people are now coming onto his Facebook site. So I think we already knew that. It was an effort to undermine American democracy and to really say horrible things.
Do you know how weird this is? The guy who's cheated is out here talking about somebody trying to undermine American democracy. I wish you would have said that in the campaign when they were actually cheating you. I wish you would have been this strong saying, I'm being cheated. They're trying to undermine American democracy. Amazing. Let's keep going.
About Secretary Clinton.
Do you have an idea of how to prevent this going forward? I mean, this was a sophisticated, so they basically used the divide of the Democratic Party between you and Secretary Clinton at the time to polarize things even more.
15 million people left the Democratic Party. 15 million people. Now, do you believe that was the Russians, or do you believe that because those people felt like they were cheated and that the party, for the most part, no longer held sway with them? They felt a disconnect. That had nothing to do with the Russians. Don't take my word for it. Take the studies below and use your own common sense and judgment. They are literally talking about social media. Let's keep going.
Right. Look, first of all, the main point to be understood is that what everybody understands, except Donald Trump, is that this was not just the 2016 campaign.
Now, and I'm going to leave it at this. You could have brought this around and gave it a little bit more context to make this not as hyperbolic as you're making it. It's like, yeah, we need to make sure our elections are secure. We don't necessarily want people injecting themselves in the election in this way. But, Chuck, fortunately, it didn't really have an impact in our election system. And all of the studies that's been done on it show that it really didn't have an impact. That would have been more honest. That would have been far more honest. If you wanted to wrap around and hit Donald Trump, fair enough, but that would have been a lot more honest. This was shameful. This was utterly shameful. So, guys, if anybody want to call in, feel free to call in. The number is on my patron list or patron account. Let's see. Yeah. But let's see who is around. When Jamal going to do a show about his clean-shaven face? Hello, jerk. I don't know if I can carry a whole show on that one. Joshua Abel. I don't know if he's been dishonest or if he's been gullible. I'm not sure which is worse. Come on, man. He's not. Do you believe that Bernie Sanders doesn't know that we destroyed Libya? Just right there. Do you believe that Bernie Sanders doesn't know that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? Do you believe that Bernie Sanders doesn't know that we have terrorists in Syria? Do you believe that Bernie Sanders at this very moment does not know that the United States is illegally in Syria? Do you believe that Bernie Sanders doesn't know that the United States has been using cyber warfare on other countries? Stuxnet, the thing that went into Iranian for the Iranian nuclear program that was destroying their cyclotrons. Do you believe that Bernie Sanders doesn't know this? I guess I'm trying to make the point to you that Bernie Sanders is not stupid. He's not stupid. Nor is he being gullible on his front, at least not from the standpoint of what he's saying to Chuck Todd. Bernie Sanders knows all that stuff. The reason why I'm using those is because those were more overt. Those are cases where the United States either destroyed an entire nation or instigated itself from the standpoint of cyberspace. Now, if Bernie Sanders knows that, if Bernie Sanders is aware of that, which he is, then how can you have a conversation like this without giving proper context? And if you're having a conversation like this and you're not giving context, you get doing it for reasons. The question becomes, what are those reasons? Under normal circumstances, they don't necessarily have a lash or leash on Bernie Sanders. In the case where Bernie Sanders wants to run again in 2020, they have a leash on Bernie Sanders. They have it from the standpoint of he wants those Hillary voters, and those Hillary voters are maniacs. And also from the standpoint of he knows that he wants to run in a Democratic primary. So the hysterical, reaction that these guys are having about Russia, to some degree, he needs to mirror their tone and to mirror the stuff that they're saying. Otherwise, he's not going to get their votes. They have a leash on him. The question to his supporters, I guess, is does it matter? Meaning, is this, am I overblowing this? Like, is it me thinking that this is a bigger deal than what it is? Clearly, I don't think it's a bigger deal than what it is. I think it's a big fucking deal. I don't like weakness. Particularly weakness from the standpoint of hitting yourself in the face. But is this just me? Is there a Bernie supporter out there who thinks I'm overblowing this or this is too much? That's funny, but I'm not saying it. Stoner Corso. Bernie was told by Donna that the DNC did not provide him with a fair primary and that Clinton campaign basically bought them. Bernie decided not to tell anyone lest precious Hillary lose the general. That's true. That's true. Stoner Corso, you're absolutely right. And just to nail that point home, when we're talking about cheating in the primaries, understand that this man is out here screaming that Russia attacked American democracy and that there need to be severe consequences for Twitter and Facebook posts. There needs to be severe consequences for that. If we're talking about attacking the electoral process, this is Donna Brazile. That was the person who was ahead of the DNC. Right around the time of the convention, the leaked emails reveal Hillary's campaign was grabbing money from the state parties for its own purposes, leaving the states with very little to support down-ballot races. A political story published on May 2nd, 2016 described the big fundraising vehicle she had launched through the states the summer before, quoting a vow she made to rebuild the party from the ground up. When our state parties are strong, we win. That's what would happen. Yet the states kept less than half of 1% of the $82 million that they amassed from the extravagant fundraisers Hillary campaign was holding, just as Gary had described. Now, what Donna Brazile is describing here is money laundering. Literally, money laundering. Money being essentially ferreted through the state parties that comes back to New York. What she's also describing is that Donna Brazile giving over the reins of the DNC to Hillary Clinton's camp. Don't take my word for it. Take Donna Brazil's word for it. That's what she's saying. So even if you want to say the process was rigged and you want to take the say, well, look, man, I don't know where this is. Don't take my word for it. Take Donna Brazil's word for it. Now, you can change the definition of rig and say, well, yeah, I mean, they did cheat in that way and they were giving Sanders favors, but, or they were giving Clinton favors. They said they were going to be impartial. They said they were going to be impartial. They were not impartial. There's nobody in their right mind that believes that they were impartial. If you want to look at, even just at the basics, the thing that was subverting democracy, I suggest you look closer to home. I suggest you look closer to home. There is a specific burn when he would not call out cheating of the party that he was running in, but he would definitely call out cheating when he's talking about a foreign democracy, even when that cheating that he's talking about is a bunch of Facebook and Twitter posts. Fucking social media. It's like, come on. Let's be honest. Old Rusky Time for Jamal, you're going to use that Red Scare logo I sent you from Twitter. It will make a great thumbnail. Oh, Rusty, I have to check it out. I need to find it. I need to find it. Ryan Adams. Did anyone see Bill Maher call for cyber war against Russia on his panel? Bill Maher is a fucking idiot. Bill Maher is a fucking idiot. Pete D. This is a big deal to me. How are we going to have a single payer healthcare and racial, social, economic, and environmental justice if we go to war with Russia? We can't do both. No, we can't do both. Not just that. The war thing is insane. Where's your... It's aggravating to me. So this is aggravating to me on a few fronts. There's a certain amount of indignity of the guy that I chose and the guy that I voted for and who won it. I wanted that guy to win. Coming out, displaying a certain amount of weakness and not calling out the cheating in the last one. I give a pass on that, fair enough. But the cheating that he does want to call out is a bunch of social media accounts. Domestic policy and foreign policy are intertwined. PD, yeah, that's true. Agreed. Agreed. A few months of political rehab, Zavix. Agree, but it shows what the elites really want. You mean war? Is that what you mean, Ryan Adams? Hello, jerk. Bill Maher is an idiot. Bill Maher is an idiot. Cool Blue 71. Should the Democratic Party officially go the way of the Whigs? Yes. This would follow Republican wins in midterms and presidential elections. Cool Blue 71. Yes. And I've given my argument. I'm not going to give the argument in this particular video. The main thrust of this video is kind of making a point of why this is a big deal. Like, why do lefties get pissed off at this? Hopefully this video, I mean, granted there were a few technical glitches, but I hope that it made somewhat of a cohesive point of why. It's bogus. It's a ridiculous premise. Like, it's like, even if your premise is right, there was no impact. It was a little to no impact. And even again, if your premise is right, not only was there little to no impact, we do the same thing. We do the same thing. Red economics, shame on Sanders. Shame on Sanders is right. Shame on Sanders is right. And again, I am looking for people who want to back Sanders up on this point. I'm looking for people who want to back Sanders up on this point. I was really hoping Terry would have called in because I kind of want to hear a perspective on this. I think my audience agrees with me on this particular front. This is gross. No, this not stop me from voting for Sanders. If Sanders runs, Sanders gets my vote. But this is gross. This is gross. I don't like this. I do not like this. America already has its own trolls. This is only done as an attack to silence anti-establishment sentiments. Vinny Strill, yeah, you're right. I keep saying he's punching himself in the face. He's punching his base in the face. That's what, I mean, when you're coming out here saying, no, there's not political unrest. People aren't pissed off and angry. People are not looking for political solutions on the edges. No. It was Russia. It was Russia. Everything's hunky-dory. It's just Russia. If Russia's social media trolls didn't topple democracy, think about what we're saying. Social media trolls on internet. If those trolls hadn't toppled democracy, we're winning at Donald Trump. This is ridiculous. They're using this to try to delegitimize Donald Trump. Look, I am not against. If they came back and they said Donald Trump broke the emollients clause and they show it, perp walk Donald Trump out the office, fair enough. But that's not what they're doing. I mean, ultimately, Democrats cheated their candidate. In order to cover the cheating, the guy who got cheated is out here shilling on Meet the Press, screaming about Russia, Facebook, and Twitter ads. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous, man. I'm sorry. This is fucking insane. They're using the same tactic against Corbyn in the UK. Yeah, I have a story on that coming up. Momentum. It's kind of put this post out with a guy that slandered Corbyn horrifically, and Corbyn didn't back down from it, essentially saying, I'm gonna see you in court if you don't rescind that particular comment. The guy took the comment down. Yeah. Brianna Wilson, socialist man of the people, Bernie Sanders, who bought a $600,000 lake house 3 weeks after endorsing Clinton. He was paid off, possibly blackmail. We don't know that. We do not know that. Chris Cross, Sanders is saying to progressives, you have nowhere to go but me. Fuck you, Sanders. I would never vote for Sala Sanders. All right, so here's the thing. Here's the catch. Here's the catch. Here's the catch. You have a base that's already somewhat cynical in regards to the way it views politics. And it's cynical for good reasons. It attached itself to a party that fucked them over royally. And then at the end of the process, after being fucked over royally, said, you have nowhere else to go. You have nowhere else to go. Now, you finally have people in the party saying, yeah, we do. We can go somewhere else. Even if our vote is just no, even if our vote is just to stay home, at the very least, we don't have to vote for you. Now, that should not be replaced by going to somebody else who puts you in the same position of you have nowhere else to go. Draw your red lines. It doesn't matter who those red lines, meaning if those things are trespass, then those things are trespass. You don't necessarily have a different benchmark depending upon the person you're dealing with. He's crossing one of my red lines on this. I don't like this. I don't like this. Such a lie. Yes, MN, she inherited her mother's property. Yeah, generally, and I don't necessarily believe in that. I mean, I'm saying I believe you on that. I don't believe there's any shady dealings going on in this case. Lisa Hauserman, I feel like saying progressive about this. I refuse to vote because I fell for that first. It literally doesn't count. And second, I don't want to give legitimacy to hideous duopoly, which is filthy to the bone. Lisa Hauserman, I gotta be honest, I'm ending up in some degree of the same camp as same progressive on this. Like grudgingly being dragged to that position. Grudgingly being dragged to that position. DK, he's doing it for the same reason he backed Hillary. Yes, agreed. He has another election in 2020. He needs to keep these Democrats from blackballing, completely Democratic blackballing him. Yes, I understand that. DK, yeah, I understand that. That doesn't make it go down any better. That doesn't, like, you're saying that he needs to give away his integrity and credibility in order to, be viable for the Democratic Party. Does that sit well? I mean, think about what you're saying. He has to pretend as if reality is not what reality is in order to stay in the Democratic Party. I agree with you. It does not make it go down any better. It does not make it go down any better. Jamal, I know, hun, it's a touchy situation with that. I'm back to work. Thanks, Avavux and all. Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate you coming in. Don't worry about the typos. TravelWise65. If you refuse to vote, you're doing the oligarchs' bidding. The thing they fear most is an electorate who doesn't vote for their candidates. I guess, TravelWise, the argument here that people are making is all of them are their candidates. Like, you have a game system. You have a game system. You have Republicans who are off the spectrum, so they're always a menace, they're always a threat. You have Democrats who are least worse, who pulls further and further to the right and normalizes the situation that's further and further to the right, meaning the discussion that we're having is so far to the right. And you take the Democrats, even though they're a right-wing party in other countries, a basic right-wing party in other countries. In the United States, because Republicans are so far off the political reservations, Democrats become the sane choice, the sane pick. You understand that both of those situations are them doing Republican bidding or the oligarchs bidding. Both. It's not one or the other. It's both. Workers do not have a party in this situation. Workers do not have an advocate in this particular political system. This is what people are pissed off at. This is what the angst comes from in this case. You have a bunch of reformers who want people to always vote Democrat. My argument, and you would find that the argument of a lot of people here, is that you shouldn't just be complicit and vote for whoever comes up. And to some degree, that system has been gamed in the way that you interact with the system. That sane choice, so that choice that you believe is somewhat of a sane candidate, is also raping you. He's raping you less, but you are still being raped. And because you're being raped less, you think to yourself, this is the same choice. This hurts less. Year after year after year after year, though, you move further and further and further to the right. And again, just from the standpoint of perspective, when they give the position of the left and the right, meaning Democrats and Republicans, you're looking at grading on a curve. You're looking at a perspective difference, not an actual difference. Both parties are paid for by the same people. So this thing of the oligarchs win if you don't vote. No, the oligarchs win even if you vote, particularly if you vote. Pulling yourself out of the political process gets you some heat in the process. And I got to be honest, we need a third party. We're in vital need of a third party. We're in vital need of a third party. Jamal just doesn't want to take the financial loss on all Sanders underwear that he purchased. Yes, D. Martin. That's exactly what it is. I don't want to take the loss on all the Sanders underwear that I purchased. Bernie's present behavior is indicative of he's courting the Democratic Party for 2021. Yes, agreed. That's exactly what it is. March the Series. Yeah. Agreed. Red economics. I've reached my bullshit limit with Sanders. I haven't reached my bullshit limit yet. I haven't reached my bullshit limit. I mean, I'm stuck in the situation of Sanders is doing this for the 2020 run. I understand it. I get it. Yes, they're trying to blackball him. Yes, they're trying to hit him in the knees with the stuff. I get it. Is he clever and bright enough to dance and dodge and deal with these things without necessarily losing himself in the process? I guess my feeling is what he's giving up in order to do this, and what he's giving up is credibility. And Sanders himself has a base that he needs to attend to. And that base looks at him and says, what the fuck is he doing? He's hitting us in the knees. He's hitting his own position in the knees. So I understand why he does it. It doesn't mean I like it. It doesn't mean I like it. Come on, Jamal. You're so close. Just let Bernie go. He's not the Bernie we thought he was. Look, it's not that I think Bernie is something other than a politician. I think he's a politician. I think the left is doing something that's problematic on a few fronts. I don't know what 2020 is going to look like. I think the left is assuming that Bernie Sanders is going to win the primaries. I don't know why you know that. There's no way for you to know that. And you're going to have a crowded field running in that primary. Meaning the dynamics of the primary is going to be different than what the dynamics of the primary was in 2016. I understand why he's doing this, so don't get me wrong. We'll see. I think the left is betting a lot on 2020. They're thinking to themselves that Sanders is going to run in 2020. Sanders is going to clean everybody's clock. The world is going to be great. It's going to be this kumbaya moment. You know, the sun is going to shine and everybody's going to bare their breast into the public. You know, they're thinking about this kumbaya glorious moment. The fact is, you can have Democrats take the House and the Senate without changing one iota. They haven't changed a squat. You're not even talking about healthcare, unemployment, none of this stuff. You're not talking about any of that. None of it. You're talking about Russia. That's what you're talking about. They're going to get elected on stupid shit like that. And assume for the moment that Sanders doesn't get it. Assume for the moment that Cory Booker gets it. You're back to where you started. The position of no. The capacity to say, no, I'm not playing this game. I think that's where you need to be. I mean, I think that's even more important than Sanders in this case. Because you don't know if Sanders is going to win. You don't even know if Sanders is going to run, per se. I think he's going to run. I mean, all things being equal, all signs point that he's going to run. I don't think he would be doing this if he wasn't going to run. But assuming that he's going to win would be somewhat of a bad prospect. I don't think you can make that assumption. I really don't. I always love and honor what is it, pre-convention Bernie. Oh, which makes the president all the worse. Angel tips. Yeah. I said that too. I want my old Bernie back. I want the guy who didn't have any chains on him, who didn't think he was going to win the election, who said fuck all to everything and I'm going to run and everybody can, I want that guy back. I want that guy back. I don't want the guy who's shilling for Democrats and shilling for the party that cheated him. I don't like that guy. I agree, Angel Tips. I agree. And man, I can give Greens my vote. I'm in a blue Illinois. Mars the Serious. And man, presuming Nina and Tulsi overcome the obstacles of the DNC, that will be tough, not a guarantee. I would vote for Tulsi. I would vote for Nina. That's pretty much it. That's literally pretty much it. Buster Peak 21. If Booker is the nominee, I'm voting for Trump. Nah, just not again. But voting Trump would be tempting. Buster Peak. No, I'm staying with my original thing. I vote for the person who represents my interests. Not playing this games or anything else. If it's TravelWise 65, when you make the oligarchs nervous, they expose themselves. That's how anyone can't see through the Russiagate BS is beyond me. Critical thinking skills are in short supply amongst the MSNBC faithful. TravelWise, it's not that they can't see through it; they don't want to see through it. There's a difference in those things. Understand the difference in those things. It's not that I am incapable of seeing through this nonsense. It's this nonsense allows me a certain level of attack and a certain method of going about the world. And as long as I scream about this particular nonsense, I don't have to talk about myself. I don't talk about the things that hurt me. I can hurt the left. I can hit the left in the knees. And I don't necessarily have to expose my own weaknesses and failures. They're incentivized to talk about Russiagate. It's not because they're fucking idiots. Now, the people who buy into this may be fucking idiots. Fair enough. But they buy into this because they've been screaming about it for a year and a half and they don't have anything to show for it. This is the first thing they've had to show for it. And as much nonsense as this is, they're talking about social media. They scream it to high heaven. They scream it to high heaven. I mean, I'm amazed by this. Like, I can't believe that this is... They're talking about Facebook and Twitter posts. Like, it's hard to get that across. Some of the stuff these guys are talking about, like Pearl Harbor, talking about Donald Trump is like he's an appeaser and all this other stuff. It's fucking insane. It's fucking insane. Diesel D's, vote for Greens. What do we have to lose at this point? More of the same. Jenny Lynn, fuck them both. Why would you fuck yourself to get revenge? But see, it's not even revenge. I mean, he's... Oh, you may be talking about somebody else. I wouldn't fuck myself to get revenge. Like, I wouldn't vote for Trump in this case. It's just shameful. That's all. That's all. Your supporters were cheated. They were outright cheated. And, I mean, because you being cheated, for all intents and purposes, you were being pushed by your supporters. Your supporters were outright cheated. You don't call it cheating. You don't call it. You don't nail it at all. Don't even bring it up. Don't even bring it up. And you're out here right now shilling on MSNBC for the same people who cheated you. And while not calling out the fact that you were cheated in that last election, you will call out the fact that Facebook, Twitter, and some YouTube videos undermine democracy. Undermine democracy. It's amazing. Anyone voting for Trump to spite Democrats, you only hurt yourself. They win no matter who you vote for. Jenny Lynn agreed on that one. I think it's insane, this idea of voting for Trump. That is insane. Jill Stein is very attractive on so many levels. Bernie, more and more seems like a gamble. D. Martin. It seems like he's willing to compromise. The question becomes, how much is he willing to compromise? It's the same Faustian bargain that Democrats fall for. This thing of, how much, what do I have to toe? What line do I have to toe in order to get the support? So, yeah. Yeah. Let me shoot myself in the foot despite the Democrats. For Scorpion 82. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's insane. You couldn't bribe me to vote for Donald Trump. Yeah, that man is absolutely disgusting. They need another, quote unquote, other to blame and distract from the real issues. Amanda Minow. Yeah. Agreed. And by the way, when is the last time you heard anybody talk about healthcare? When is the last time you heard anyone talk about education. When is the last time you heard anyone talk about, I mean, do you remember during the debates and everything else, Sanders was talking about Palestinians, he was talking about not toppling democracies, all this stuff. I mean, not toppling governments. He was talking about all this stuff. And he started with a certain momentum going into this year. So he tried, like when he first started. He did try. He tried, you know, this healthcare law and all this other stuff. He tried. And the one thing people kept screaming was, stop towing this line on Russia. Stop. It's hurting you. Stop towing this line. And he kept towing this line on Russia. And now we've ended up in the unenviable position, this undignified spot, where a man who was cheated screams that he was cheated, but not by the person who cheated him, but by the other guy, Russia. But by Russia. Because they have Facebook and Twitter ads. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Tar thralls. Dem enter is a losing strategy. Those who dem exited will never return. And how stupid to use Bernie Sanders as bait when he is why we left in the first place. Bernie's the biggest threat to progressives. That's interesting. That's interesting. Yes. Oh man, I don't know if I agree with that, but I don't know if I can disagree with it either. I have mixed feelings on that one. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that one. I think you're right. So it depends on what your goal is, right? I mean, that's ultimately what you're saying. If your goal is a third party, then Bernie Sanders hits you on your knees. If your goal is trying to take over the Democratic Party, then you would think that what Bernie Sanders is doing is somewhat acceptable. You would think he's doing what he needs to do in order to run in 2020. What I wish, and I think you're right, they are using him as bait, meaning they're dingling him, you know, like, hey, don't leave, he's going to run in 2020, don't leave. Now the question becomes, what happens if he gets shafted in 2020? What happens if he's shafted in 2020? What happens if he just loses in 2020? Then what? I don't think Sanders was the reason why they left. I think them cheating Sanders was the reason why they left. I think them putting Hillary Clinton up was the reason why a lot of people left. Those 15 million people left. I think Democrats are lying and failing miserably at living up to their philosophical responsibilities is the reason why those people left. The question is, are those people going to stay gone? Like, are those people willing to say, yeah, man, I'm done with this. And until we get something real, until we get something actual, substantive change, I'm done. Now, can those people stand in that and stay in that spot and be very clear in that spot? And beyond that, those people need a certain amount of organization to be in that particular spot. Meaning it's not enough to just pout in the corner. You need some level of organization. We really need a third party. Honestly, we really vitally need a third party, desperately need a third party. And it needs to be a third party that has capacity to win, not a pressure part candidate. No, you need something real and legit. Real and legit. I guess my feeling, though, is to even get to that point, you have to start off at this basis of, I'm done. You have to start at no. Before you figure out something else, I think you need to start at no. I am done. I'm done. Even if Sanders wins, his policies aren't nearly radical enough to end capitalism and save the planet crisscross. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, he's a Democrat. He's a classic Democrat. He's calling himself a socialist to create some kind of distinction. But for all intents and purposes, he's just a classical Democrat. No, his policies are not going to end capitalism. And no, I don't think his policies save the planet either. What I want, though, is a shift to the left. I want a shift to the left, yeah. I want a significant shift to the left. Brandon Wilson, the DNC admitted in court that they didn't follow their own rules in the primaries. He knows he was cheated and still blames Russia in his own base. Brandon Wilson. Again, Brandon Wilson, you're making my point. His base doesn't buy this ridiculousness. Meaning, even if the base takes what you're saying is true, the base understands that this is nonsense. You're talking about social media. It doesn't have an effect on the election. Meaning, little to no effect. Your base knows this. Your base knows that you know this. So it's not only that your base knows this is ridiculous. Your base knows that you know this is ridiculous. And yet, your base knows and sees you told this line. Your base knows that you yourself was cheated, and yet sees you talk about cheating. Your base, cynical as it is, was willing to give you a chance and say that, okay, maybe this guy who electrified me and woke all these people up, maybe this guy is going to do something different. That cynical base is just seeing you throw it under the bus, throw your supporters under the bus, hit yourself in the knees, and say what they know you understood was not true. Meaning, at the very least, you understood that there was a larger context to what you were saying, and yet you still talked in these terms of severe penalties and all those other stuff. Yeah. All I'm saying is not good. I'm saying this is not good. Bernie is not Hillary Clinton. I mean, come on, guys, put it in context. I'm doing this video because I'm greatly bothered by this. By the same token, it's like you had to put it in context. Sanders hasn't changed. Let me say it this way. Ultimately, he's a political animal. The difference between Sanders before and Sanders after is that the Sanders now believes that he has a chance to be president of the United States. That's the difference. Like, what does a person look like when they're running in a presidential race and they don't think they have a chance of winning? What does that person look like when that person is running in a presidential race and they do believe they have a chance of winning and they don't want to fuck it up? This is what's taking place. He believes that he's going to run in 2020. He believes that he doesn't want to fuck it up. He believes he has to toe a certain narrative in order to make this work, in order to get to the point of running in 2020. Now, some people can say, well, dude, Jamal, you're being too hard on him and all this other stuff. In the same way that Sanders has a responsibility to do what he thinks is right in order to achieve the aims that he's trying to achieve, I am stuck with the same responsibility. This case, to be honest and open about my particular opinion about what I see is taking place. I don't like it. I don't like it. When I show his balls in a jar under the DNC, I'm doing it for a reason. It's not out of spite. It's not because I'm just being a bad guy. It's because I'm trying to make this point. You're undermining yourself. Is it possible to retain your soul while you still go through this idea of trying to win the presidential election? And if it's not, what's the point? If it's not, what's the point? I believe Sanders is clever enough to have these conversations in a political way where he doesn't necessarily toss out everything in order to achieve his objectives. This was not one of those cases. This was definitely not one of those cases. Alright, guys, I'm going to end this because I have a few more that I need to do. I will probably be back in about 30 minutes. So, thank you guys for showing up. I will see you guys shortly. If you guys enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. I know this one was more talking and explaining, but I just wanted to explain why lefties were feeling a particular way about Sanders in this. A lot of the population may not necessarily understand it, particularly if you're not on the left. But being on the left, I wanted to get across this thing of this is bogus, and his supporters understand this is bogus, and because his supporters understand this is bogus, this is a bit much to swallow. This is a bit much to swallow. So, I will be back shortly. Yeah, I'll be back shortly. If you guys, I think I already said that. See you guys in about 30. Thanks, guys.